we have worked on a smart TTIP paper, so we call it, but I give immediately the floor to Marietje, who is leading the group in this matter.
Thank you, President Verhofstadt. Thank you all for coming and thank you for your time. Tomorrow we take an important vote on what has been a very intensive stock-taking exercise to which I believe nearly every member of this Parliament has contributed. 14 committees gave their opinion to the main resolution, to which 900 amendments came, which altogether have led to a very strongly supported set of wishes, a real message and a good push in the right direction to build a good TTIP. We want the EU negotiators to make sure that there is a good TTIP, and we want to see more concrete results, especially on the American side. The context for these negotiations is, of course, that we want to strengthen cooperation between the EU and the US in the times when the world is changing very rapidly. And in fact, strengthening the rules-based system should help prevent a race to the bottom. And that is what we've been working on very intensively. In our group, our key priorities are formulated in a paper. We have clearly expressed what it is we want in a good TTIP and what we don't want. Very clear priority for the ALDE group, and we want this to be a European priority as well, is market access. The American market is still very protected, and we cannot envision a good TTIP without significant opening up of the US market, including in the transport sector. Secondly, we think that TTIP should be about much more than just the impact for big businesses. It should be felt concretely by citizens, and particularly through improved conditions to do business in the US for SMEs in Europe. So we want a very ambitious chapter on SMEs. TTIP has, for the first time in a trade agreement, a special chapter for this. In our paper, we spell out what this should lead to. And then we've heard a lot of concerns about the lowering of standards, questions about whether or not things like the chlorine chicken could come onto the European market. And so for our group, it is crystal clear that standards cannot be lowered, and we're glad to see that the Commission agrees with that. And also that there's been a joint statement by the US and the EU that public services are not a part of TTIP. And last but not least, nobody is happy about the existing investor-to-state dispute settlement mechanism. And so we have spelled out what drastic reforms and a new 21st century model for investment protection looks like. That's the fourth priority in our ALDE paper. I know that this is a short briefing on a very complex and comprehensive topic, but I'll be happy to answer questions if you have them. Thank you.
Do you have questions?
Joanna Sopińska, Europolitics. I have a question on TTIP and especially on the ISDS. There are a lot of controversies about this mechanism, and the vote in INTA committee was based on a compromise between the two blocs. On this, on a compromise amendment, do you expect that similar situation will happen at the plenary vote? I mean, what are the chances for the compromise on ISDS between the SND and ALDE and the ECR and the EPP? Thank you.
Well, indeed, after a lot of hard work, we found compromise between the four main political groups of this Parliament in the International Trade Committee on ISDS, but also on the 60 compromise amendments. So this report has broad support by the four main political groups in the INTA committee. Everyone agrees that the existing investor-to-state dispute settlement mechanism, of which EU member states have already signed 1,400 bilateral agreements, doesn't work. It's no longer fit for the 21st century. The world has changed. We have a lot of concerns about transparency, about the impartiality of arbitration judges, about access to the procedures also for civil society organizations, and we actually believe that we should work towards an international dispute settlement mechanism and international norms for investment protection. And so building on the paper that the European Commission has proposed with drastic reforms presented in them is an important step forward. And our compromise in the International Trade Committee wishes to build on these drastic reforms to work towards a modern investment protection mechanism and to especially work towards an international court and international system that can also be a stepping stone to a more multilateral approach, which has always been the preference of the EU, to have multilateral rules to which all countries can participate. But unfortunately, the Doha rounds at the WTO didn't render more results, and that's why you see globally a lot of bilateral initiatives. And I think it's important that this Parliament sends a strong signal that we want this reform. And therefore, I hope that the INTA Committee proposals for reform will be supported tomorrow as well.
Jean-Sébastien Lefebvre, Contexte, une question en français, s'il vous plaît. Si demain l'amendement...
If the ISDS amendment suggested by the Socialists last week is adopted tomorrow, will you vote in favor of the final report?
Well, to be honest, there are various opinions within the Socialist group, so perhaps it's important to ask them what their group believes now, ultimately. What we know now is that their group has supported the compromise that was found after hard work on a number of issues in the Trade Committee, on 60 compromises, led by Socialist Chairman of the INTA Committee, Mr. Lange. And so I trust that he will stick to the work that he has done and that he will do his best to convince his group to do the same. I think you know, that's only logical. And if you have questions about the Socialist point of view, I think it's better to ask them. They have a lively discussion about this issue, and we have had too in our group, and we agree that we need drastic reforms and a modern system of investment protection that is very different from the existing models. But to build towards that, you have to come with proposals on the table. And that's what we're doing now. We want to be constructive, work towards an international multilateral solution. And this stock-taking exercise, not only on investment protection, but across the board, has been very useful in spelling out in much more detail what this Parliament expects from a good TTIP.
More questions? If not, then we wish you a very good day.